everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's AVST Live webinar. Today we're going to be talking about call completion. Before we get started, just want to draw your attention to the opening slide here, which shows you a couple of our upcoming webinars that are happening next month. When we send a follow-up email, we'll make sure to include a link to those in case you would like to join us next month for those webinars. And before Neil gets started, I will also mention we are doing a Plantronics headphone giveaway, so we won't do that live during the webinar, but we will draw a name after we conclude. And if you're a lucky winner, you'll get an email from me later today with that information. And then, of course, want to let you know the slides are available for download. Those are in the handouts area of the webinar panel. And in addition, you'll find the question box there. We'll have time for Q&A at the end. You're welcome to type your questions in at any time, and we'll have those queued up. We'll, of course, give you instructions at the end as well in case you would like to submit a question at that time. And lastly, we are recording this, so we'll make sure that the follow-up email later today includes a link to the recording as well as the slides again. And so with that, I'll let Neil Butler, our Director of Sales Engineering, get us started with the presentation.
Thank you, Ann. Welcome, everyone. Some of you are fairly regular attendees on these and have a pretty good idea of what we do here. But just kind of as a quick overview, we tend to pick a topic that's appropriate to our solution and sort of drill down on that one topic. And we have quite a range of things our product does, so there's quite a few topics. But this one in particular is one that I'm very fond of presenting because it may be the biggest differentiator for our product, is what we do with call completion. And it's an area where I get a lot of quizzical looks when I start out in front of a customer in particular saying, let's talk about call completion. It's kind of, well, people call and we answer the phone. And unfortunately, that's really not what it is. So we're gonna broaden that whole concept up a bit. And most of you probably know at least a little bit about us. If you don't, we've been in the software business for over 30 years in unified communications, and we're a very focused company in that we have this one solution that fits into this category, and we work really hard on making it the best of breed. And we're recognized as that in a number of areas. And over the time, we've really come up with a way of making a really good product that's founded on listening to our customers, which I think is not always the case for software companies. But we have customers that have had this product for over 30 years, and they are very, very happy to tell us what they need and what we do right and what we do wrong. And we're pretty happy with the way we've positioned ourselves in the market by focusing on this one area. It has left us a little less recognized than some of the people we compete with, but we have an offering that we're very happy with. It really tends to fit in. We started a long time ago as a small company selling small voicemail systems, but we outgrew that, and we're definitely in the enterprise space, which is a lot more fun because enterprises are complex. And everyone is different, everyone has different needs, and that keeps it very interesting. And if you sort of look through our portfolio of who we do business with, you'll see that we've been extremely successful in the large enterprise space. And it's because, I think, of our focus. In this area that we focus in, every one of us gets up every day and focuses on this particular part of the unified communications market. We don't worry about making telephone systems or network routers or anything else. And as a result, I think our product shines because of that focus that we put on it. If you sort of look at our product, the CXD product, it's known for a lot of things. It's kind of in a lot of areas. It started, as I said, as a voicemail automated attendant product, and very quickly also became a fax product. Years ago, we acquired WriteFax and had a combination platform with fax and voice on it that really no one else could touch. We've since split that company apart, and WriteFax went on its way with Capteris and now with OpenText, but we still maintain the ability to use that product as part of our solution. That's sort of the core call processing world, where we still do a lot of things better than everyone else does. Part of that's probably because our system's been in development now for over 35 years, and no one else can really say that. Everyone else has sunset system after system, kind of started again from scratch. And because we started at the beginning of this whole open hardware platform type industry, we have not had to do that. We're also recognized for our interoperability. One of the great things is when I talk to people about what our product does, there's no caveat, but to do this, you'll have to rip out your phone system and upgrade it. You'll have to rip out your groupware product because you don't have the right one or the right version or the right kind of deployment. So we can come in and talk about the things like we're talking about today, and it doesn't matter what phone system you have or what groupware you have. Our product works with all of them. The mobility piece is probably our most active focus in terms of things that are changing. In the voicemail automated tenant world, that hasn't changed a lot in the last 10 years. But mobility, it's like we get, as a generation of workers, we seem to get more and more mobile, every year or so. And mobility brings with it all kinds of advantages and all kinds of challenges. And we're really talking about one of the big mobility challenges today when we talk about call completion. And then we also have a communications and business process set where we have some specific ready-made applications that can help you with a number of your business processes. And one of those is one of the webinars that Ann showed you at the beginning. But we also have custom tools. So when you come up with a unique business communications challenge, we have the tools on our platform to help you build something that solves that as well. So if we sort of look at our market out there and look at the top players in all these areas, we have just a wide range of experience and references, which is nice, in all of these areas. And it really gives us a chance to figure out what we should be doing for businesses in general without the limitations of worrying about which specific phone system we're going to connect it to. So what happens here now is we have these conversations all the time with people that say, oh, you're a voicemail company, you'll be out of business soon, voicemail's going away. Well, I'm pretty comfortable with as long as there's phone calls that will need to be voice messaging. Let's face it, every now and then you just want to call up and yell at somebody, and if you don't get them directly, you just soon yell at them in a message, and that'll be voicemail's final implementation, maybe just to catch those callers. But it's very active today. In fact, this survey here kind of surprised us a little bit. The phone is still just so easy to use. Everywhere where we are, we have our phone with us. So it is the #1 communications methodology still for external communications, and followed very closely by email, and then the reverse if you're in internal communications, because those are more planned, I think, than what phone conversations still are. So if we're talking about completing calls, as I said, when I talk to customers, they seem a little confused. But the truth is, calls just really aren't handled very well in the average enterprise today. If you go out and look up the studies for how many calls, what percentage of calls are completed going into an enterprise on the first call, you're going to find it's very, very low. And that completing of calls directly relates to customer satisfaction, employee productivity. If you think of the latency of some transaction when you're trying to get something done, if you have to have 3 or 4 back and forth phone calls to get it done, then the effectiveness of that entire transaction really is in jeopardy. Also, phone calls tend to be the urgent conversations. If you need to talk to somebody right now about something, you're probably not going to send them an email. You may IM them if it's an internal kind of connection, but probably it's going to be a phone call. And we'll never really lose that tone of voice value of a phone conversation. You've all had phone conversations with people where the 15 seconds of silence told you everything about how that call was going on. And you really can't put in 15 spaces in email and have that same kind of effect. So calls remain important. I told you, the low rate of completed calls. I usually quote somewhere between 20 and 30%. You can find surveys that say as low as the low teens, like 13% of calls get completed the first time. And it isn't that you have bad employees, or it isn't that you have bad equipment. It's just that we've made it really hard. Because if you think about it, if you went back 30 years, most people worked at a desk. And if they weren't at the desk, then there was no expectation of communications at all. This was pre-mobile devices and email and then mobile phones. And basically, if you weren't at your desk, somebody took a message, and the next time you got back to your desk, you'd return phone calls. And that's just not the way it is anymore. More and more, we tend to be out and about. The mobility gives us an incredible advantage in terms of getting out to our customers and really getting things done effectively. But it brings with us this problem of, how do I get in touch with people when they're that mobile? And, you know, it used to be, again, going back 20 years, if somebody called and didn't get you, someone, human usually, took a message, wrote it down, and and that pink slip literally went on your desk. And if they called in the morning before lunch, they would expect you to return that call maybe after lunch. And if they called after lunch and left a message, the expectation was you'd probably call the next day. And that's just not the way it is anymore. As they hang up the phone from leaving you a message, that customer is already wondering why you haven't called back. I mean, the immediacy of what we try and do these days is just become a normal part of business. But the problem is, if someone's going to call you, where do they call you? It isn't like you have a single phone number anymore. Now there's corporate numbers with an attendant transferring, there's DID numbers, there's all sorts of different methodologies for doing this, but almost all of us have at least two relevant phone numbers. One that gets the call to your desk at work, and one that gets it to your mobile device. But also it's true many of us have more than one mobile device. You might have a couple of different mobile phones, or you might have soft clients on your iPad, or Skype clients on your mobile device. So there's many numbers, and to make it even more confusing, those different devices are popular at different times of the day. If you think about it, you start off your day perhaps at work, and the best way to reach you would be to get that phone call to your desk phone, and then you go into a meeting for 2 hours, and there's no good way for most people to get that call to you, although we have something in that area that's kind of interesting. Then you go to lunch, and now that for that little time slot, you know, it'd just be your mobile phone would be the only chance of doing it. So how in the world are you going to get calls to people when their location and their devices change? Now the truth is, any phone system today gives the user the ability to solve this problem. And it's very, very simple. You go into work, you record your greeting saying, I'm at work today from 8 o'clock to noon. I will be at my desk from 8 o'clock to 10, I'll be at my desk. From 10 to 11:30, I'll be in a meeting. And after that, I'll go to lunch. And then when you come back from lunch, you change your greeting and saying, for the next 2 hours, I'm working and I'll be available. After that, I will be on the road. You can reach me at my mobile phone. So you literally can forward your phones and record new greetings to solve this problem. Now we'll have a little test. Let's see how many of you know your employees as well as I know your employees. I venture to say none of your employees will do that. I'm very, very comfortable with that because we've tried to get people to use some of these kind of technologies for years, and they just won't do it. It used to be at least there'd be a daily greeting that people would record on their voicemails. But now almost every voicemail in the world says, hi, this is me. Sorry I didn't get your call. Leave me a message. I'll go back to you as soon as I can. And that has literally no valuable content. You know who it is you called, and you know you're leaving a voicemail, and get back to you as soon as I can. You're pretty sure that that person probably recorded that greeting several years ago, so there's really not much content there either. So how do you solve this problem? Because if you could solve this problem, you'd solve the call completion problem, and you'd get that hit in customer satisfaction, you'd reduce latency, all of those things that we know can happen if calls are completed on the first try. Well, you can't do it by depending on the employee. That's just the way it is. They're not going to participate at that level. And the second problem you have is because of that single recorded greeting, when I call somebody and I don't get them, I'm a little irritated because I didn't get them, and then I'm a little more irritated when I get their generic greeting because that phone call didn't accomplish anything. I'm right back where I was. What do I do now? When are they going to be available? It would be nice if you could give them better information. If you can't complete the call, at least give them better information and maybe even some options in terms of what they can do. And the trick here is you better figure out a way to do it that doesn't involve the end user. And that's what we've done. We have an intelligent call routing application that routes calls based on context. Now, what's that mean? Well, it means we don't expect the user to do anything to start with. So the very first thing we do is we put a schedule in place. This is just such a little thing to do, but this immediately takes us, to the head of the class. If you use your mobile phone, let's say you have your mobile phone twinned with your desk phone, which is kind of a low horsepower version of helping call completion. And then you go home and you take your mobile phone with you. Well, since it's twinned, if anybody calls you, somebody calls you at 3 in the morning, knowing you're not at work but planning on leaving you a voice message, of course your mobile phone's going to ring. And it's just, you know, you either learn to turn your mobile phone off, or you unforward it, and you turn off your twinning, and then you forget to put it back on. It's just not a very good solution. It would make sense for the user to have a schedule that says, during business hours that I get to define, let's say 8 to 5, when people call me, send those calls to me. But if people call me after those hours, then don't send the calls to them, send it to voicemail. So we start with just a very simple schedule. And in the lower left-hand corner, you see our user client where they can control that schedule. So some people have a very simple schedule. Some people have a more complicated schedule. Some people's schedules change every day. And we let the user start by saying, okay, I'm going to be in the office, I believe, today from 8 to 5. So I'll set up a rule that says during those hours, go ahead and send calls to my desk. After those hours for an hour, because I'll be in commute, send them to my mobile phone. And then after that, wait till morning. I don't want to take calls. The next thing that can tell us great things about users and what they're doing, of course, is their calendar. We've been asked for years, can't we change the greeting when, you know, the calendar says I'm in a meeting? And we set off to do that years ago and figured, well, that's a good start, but there's a lot that you can do with that calendar that's better. Since we know, you know, we can have access to your calendar, we know what you're doing. To a certain extent, we know where you are. We can know how to handle your calls. Now, a lot of people would simply say, when I'm in a meeting, create a greeting that says, you know, I'm in a meeting and I'll be out at noon, and then go ahead and send it to voicemail, which then that's a good way to handle it too. So building a greeting on the fly based on your calendar is something that we can do, and that just makes that greeting so much better, so much more useful. And once again, the user doesn't have to think about this; it just happens. But even better than sending to voicemail, we have the ability with this routing engine to say, if they're in a meeting, let's send a notification to their mobile device, a silent notification that pops up, and they can see who's calling, and then they have the option of taking that call. They can step out and take that call, or they can hit a button and leave a silent acknowledgement for that call. And you'd hear, Neil Butler was unable to take your call, but we'll call you back in 1 hour. So many more choices than just voicemail or not, and driven by that user's calendar. And one thing about, you know, we can't get users to do things on the phone side, but I'm pretty comfortable that all your users maintain their calendars exceedingly well, because you just have to. And that means as a context source, that is extremely good. In the lower right-hand corner, there's a link client there, or it could be a Skype client. And we can use the presence engine to route calls as well. And I am a little amused that Microsoft calls that a presence tool, because it's kind of a happy face, sad face presence tool. You are at your desk and have touched your computer or not. It doesn't really know where you are. So we kind of look at that. It's still useful. You know, you can know if I use my Skype to set do not disturb presence, I could send calls straight to voicemail. So I can use those tools and those indicators as well as part of that contact setup. But the most useful one and the most impressive one, I think, for most people up in the upper left-hand corner is location. No, we don't know where you are. We don't have an application that tracks your users so that we can know where they are. What we can do is allow the administrator to set up, let's say, 3 locations for a user that they can then go define themselves. And they do that by opening our mobile client, going to that location and hitting a few buttons. And I now have work defined, let's say. That means when a call comes in and I have a rule that says, send that call to their desk phone at work, before I do that, I can ping the mobile device and say, well, let me see first. Are they at work? And if they're not, why would I bother ringing that phone? I would go to the next entry on the list. I may have taken that phone home and built a location called home. I work from home some days. And if home was the next entry on that list, then again, rather than send the call there, we would ping that device. It would come back and say, no, they're not at home. Therefore, we would just send it to their mobile phone. So I now, based on where they are, can make an intelligent decision in terms of how to send them the call, what device they're using. I can have this nice list of devices, and call completion based on this engine is going to be dramatically better You can't hardly even imagine how much better it is. It's so much better that we have tools for the user to be able to capture some of this and give themselves a little bit of freedom, because the calls now know, where they are and how to find them. So when you talk about work as an activity and not a location, this is the prime tool that deals with that. We will figure out the location. We understand you're at work, and we'll get the call to you. Probably the #1 requested feature for years before we did this was, can't you just send a greeting that says Neil Butler's in a meeting, and from the calendar. And so that's definitely a part of what we do here, but it goes much further than that. This is not a Generation 1 product. This product's been around a long time. So things like, if I'm in a meeting from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and my business hours are defined from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and someone calls and I'm in that meeting, it's not going to say Neil Butler's in a meeting and will be available at 5 o'clock. It's smart enough to know, well, when's my next day that I have defined as a work day, so it'll come back typically and say he'll be available tomorrow at 8 a.m. unless there's a meeting there. So this is a product that's 15 years in the making. So you'll find so many different things that we do in terms of, put it out once, customer comes back and says, oh, it would work better this way. So we have been adding to this product for almost 15 years. Something like in Outlook, I have a little drop-down window. So when I build something in my calendar, normally my context would say, here's how you handle things when you're in a meeting. But maybe my meeting is, I'm going to be half a day in a virtual trade show tomorrow afternoon. Well, you know how that goes. You're going to be sitting there doing some work and listening to the trade show, and if calls come in, you still want them. Maybe I'm going down the hall to do that in the conference room. So I want to set a status that for that calendar, I just want you to send calls to the conference room phone. So there's powerful tools to let the user control their day. We start by taking all that off their hands, setting it up so that we'll do the bulk of the work, but we always give them a shot at how to do this. Now, the way this works, when a call comes in, if a user has this feature on, the very first thing we do is look at their schedule, and based on their schedule, we pick an availability state. So you can see the availability states over on the side. And so the blue pieces happen to be for at my desk, and at my desk says, ring my desk phone first. If I don't answer, ring my mobile phone. And then I have a mobile availability that says just ring my mobile phone. I've got an at home that says ring my soft phone and then my mobile phone. I have all these different ones available that are built in automatically. Now that one at the bottom in a cafe, tablet, soft phone, is actually somewhat of a joke referring to me, because I have to read a lot of technical documents, and I do that at Starbucks down the street. And I do that on my iPad, and I've actually, an iPad will run our mobile app just like iPhone will. I happen to be set up so when I walk into that Starbucks, I have a defined location, and calls will come to the Skype client on my iPad. So this can get as complex as your users are, although just as simple, if I'm at my desk, ring my desk phone. If I'm not, ring my mobile phone if it's during business hours. Just that simple rule will be helpful for a lot of people. So I have that schedule, and then I have automatic overrides, and that's what we've been talking about from contacts, my presence engine, a location, my calendar. Basically, when a call comes in, we'll check these automatically, get that current status, and that could send it to a different availability state. So normally my schedule says I'm at my desk, but my calendar says I'm in a meeting. And so notice here in a meeting is mobile notify. That's where I would give that silent pop-up. So automatic overrides are looked at. Manual overrides basically supersede everything. Now here's why you have a manual override. You go into a meeting. It's going to be a 3-hour meeting. After an hour, everything blows up. You're going to leave. You're just going to go ahead and leave early and go to your next appointment. So you go out and get in your car. Now for the next 2 hours, your calendar thinks you're in a meeting. It might be doing the pop-ups, let's say, to the phone, which you really don't want in your car. So you can call in or go into the web client and set a manual override. Change availability to mobile. And how long? For 3 hours. And I mean, you basically, the user has complete control over this if they want it. So if you look at this entire set of call routing features, this is all about, how can we complete this call? What tools do we have at our disposal besides user involvement that let me complete this call? And how much information can I give back to the user? If I'm sending calls to my desk, but my Skype client says I haven't been at my desk, I haven't touched my keyboard, maybe all I do is change my greeting to Neil Butler is in the office, but away from the phone. And then I go ahead and ring the phone, or I ring the mobile. So the ability to tailor this for enhanced call completion and better information to the caller is really the strength of that intelligent call routing engine. Now, because we're doing so much with mobile, we've changed around some of the things now. When mobile was sort of new, it was an additional license, and now it's a standard part of the product. Both the web client and the mobile client now come free, and we don't license voicemail users either. We just license ports. So you can have as many people as you want that can get their messages securely from our mobile clients and our web clients. We have an Android and an iOS device, and we have a whole other webinar that talks about that mobile device where you can see all the things that it does. But sort of in a nutshell, the basic free client gives you secure messaging, the ability to get your voicemail securely on that device, and mailbox settings, greetings, directory, etc. And then the license that gives you the enhanced call completion that we've been talking about adds a lot of things, like the call screening functionality, where when you answer a call on the phone, it will say, you have a call from John Tyler. Please say accept call, reject call, or acknowledge. I can say acknowledge over the phone. It comes back and says, please record a brief acknowledgement message. And I say, hi, John, listen, I'm just going into a meeting. I'll call you as soon as I get out. Then I hang up and go about my business, and John hears, Neil Butler was unable to take your call, but left you this brief message, and it plays my acknowledgement to him. So that's the kind of additional functionality that gets added. We talked earlier about that same kind of functionality, but in a silent version. And that's basically the silent acknowledge feature. And this is how most of us have it set up when we're in meetings. Let's face it, in most meetings, there's a device on the table and you're triaging email. That's in recognition of the fact that things happen where email, regardless of what you think you should be in that meeting for, something might happen that gets you out. But you really can't do that with phone calls. You can't have your phone ring and then answer it and say, oh, John, it's you. Yeah, you're not important enough to interrupt my meeting. You have to call me later. And then stare around at all the people in the meeting glaring at you for interrupting the meeting. But what you can do with our mobile client is get a silent pop-up. If that person is on your system or in your personal contacts, it'll show who it is. That gives you a pretty good idea why they're calling. And then you can choose to play a silent acknowledgement, and that's the screen on the far right, or to record an acknowledgement, or to transfer it to another device or another person. So not only great completion of calls to get it to that person, but great options on how you want to handle that call. In many cases, these calls will come through our automated attendant. They still work with DID as well. If you have a DID set up, DID rings at that desk phone, and that's the phone number people have, that's no problem. When it comes to us on a forwarded call, even if the availability state says, we'll ring the desk and then ring the mobile phone, our system's smart enough to know it came from the desk, so it'd skip that and just go to the mobile phone. So all of this works as well. We have a very powerful speech automated attendant, both DTMF and speech, and we're finding a lot of take up on this automated part because there's so many new features in it that it works much better. It's not just a speech directory like some of the other people offer. It's a fully speech-enabled system where you can basically prompt the caller for all the commands in speech. It still supports DTMF as well. As we grew into the enterprise, one of the things we discovered with automated attendants is, particularly as we look at consolidation, where these 15 sites get consolidated down to one on the data structure, on the telephony structure, and then on the call processing structure, you now have problems where numbers are coming in and using features in an automated attendant that you really don't want to be general. You might have a departmental or a location-based setup where when somebody says John Tyler in the directory, you only want to look at the John Tylers in one area or one department. So both our DTMF, dial by name, and our speech directories can be compartmentalized. They can be broken down into groups to make them work more effectively. They can also handle company-wide. Just depends on what your architecture is. Our automated attendant is completely flexible. We have an unlimited table, meaning we can answer every call differently throughout the entire year if you want. And that's because with a large consolidated system, it could be in 3 time zones, and it could have over those time zones 20 departments, each one with different business hours starting and stopping, and that requires a certain bit of flexibility, and we definitely have that. And then on top of that, we have that self-service IVR, our special tools, where when things come into a particular location that need particular handling, like perhaps you want to ask a caller for their account number and then do a lookup in your AR database and see if they're a customer in good standing, and if they are, send them to the order entry desk they ask for, but if they're not, send them to the collections desk. So that's the kind of things that we can take even further along. We don't talk too much about the voice messaging piece in our product. It's the most full-featured out there by far because we've been working on it for so long. It does have great alternate telephone user interfaces. If you look at moving from one of the legacy systems to our system, we have the best alternate user interface out there. It requires literally no training for your users at all. And it's not just top level, it's mapped from the top to the very bottom. So all of those features are there and available. And one of the things we've been focusing on in the last maybe 3 software releases is security. Security was not really a concern when there was a separate telecom department. It didn't really hardly ever come up. I mean, half of our circuits back then were coming in on lines where any phone tech in the closet could put his test set on it and listen to your calls. Nobody even really thought about security. When we merged telecom into data, their expectations of security carried over. So now it's very important that everything is secure. And we have really hit the point now where we're completely comfortable with this discussion. 9.0, our software release that comes out next, will actually put the final piece in place, which is encryption of the messages at rest. In other words, messages on the CX will be encrypted using EFS. We've for years now had the transport secure, TLS and SRTP for the SIP trunk connections, and secure SMTP for email, and SSL for web connections, and we're completely secure on the wire. And our clients are secure. Now, this is something that's that kind of comes to some people as a revelation, but if you have a problem where you really don't want to put your voicemail messages into your email for confidentiality reasons, compliance reasons, if you leave those messages on CX where they're secure, and you use our mobile client to get to them, our mobile client will stream that message down and play it, but it won't save it on the device at all. And we have security tokens for authentication, so the user's credentials aren't stored on the device either. Very, very safe way to implement it. It's the same thing with our web client. You can get your messages securely, but you can't get them off the system. There's no file attachment save. And it also has security tokens. For those that do want to put their messages into Exchange, we have a private message feature where you can set up your system so if somebody leaves you a private message, and that can be internal or external people that mark it as private, that message cannot be forwarded. But if you put it into Exchange, we have no control over Exchange. And while Exchange would recognize the private marker, it would still let you forward it. So we can set a system up that when you get a private message, we will put a message into Exchange. It'll be an email message telling you to go to the telephone to play that message. So we have really locked down the security from start to finish. On the whole unified messaging side, we're recognized by Gartner as the best of breed product out there to go to. We are the most flexible. We have the most time in the industry. We did years before anybody else did. So we're happy always to talk about all the things involved in And certainly features we talk about, but it's a lot about environment. It's a lot about confidentiality. It's a lot about compliance. There's just kind of this, what we do with voice messages has been a trial for a lot of companies over the last couple of years. And that takes us to the question screen.
Thanks very much, Neil. Okay, there's a few questions in the queue already. Just as a reminder, if you're interested in putting through a question, you may have it minimized. Use the orange arrow in the upper corner, and then you should see the question box toward the bottom. Neil, first question. Is there any advantage to forward calls from the user's cell phone, or do you have to train them to give out the main number?
Well, you can forward them from their cell phone. We have people that do that. If they're going to give out their cell phone number, then, if they don't forward it, then what happens is they have two email mailboxes now, or voicemail mailboxes. If we get the call first, what we're going to do, let's say the rule says transfer to their mobile phone. We'll set up a call to the mobile phone, but if they don't answer and take the call, we will pull that call back. No matter what they set up on their mobile phone, voicemail or not, we will pull that call back and leave that message on our side. So there are some advantages to have it come to us first. That being said, you have 10,000 users and they're all using DID. There's a lot of other things to look at before you simply move them all off DID. So that's the kind of conversation we gladly have customer by customer.
Okay, thanks. Next question. How long is the delay to the caller while an employee decides how to handle the call? Is there music on hold?
There is music, separate music on our system, not the telephone system music on hold, but one that you have complete control over. And how long? There's just a list of things we would have to discuss. If you have one call in one list in your call list, when it comes and answers the phone, it will initiate that call, and it really won't be, if it's to a typical telephone or a mobile number, it really won't be any longer than it is to your desk. That's the same kind of transaction. Now, if you want to do the pop-up, the silent pop-up, that will take a little longer, because while we answer that call and play the music on hold, we then send a data piece to the device that pops up. The user hits their choice, what do they want to do, that data piece comes back. And that can add some delay. 10 or 15 seconds is probably average, or maybe even a little high. Maybe 10 seconds is average. Now, if you have 3 devices and you want to try all 3 of them, so you're not using the location feature, but you say, ring my desk, ring my home business office, ring my mobile phone, well, that's going to take a while, and we have options now on how you want to handle that call. So do you want to simply play that music on hold with the customer and go try them 1, 2, 3, or do you want to come back once and say, couldn't reach them at that number, I'm going to try the other numbers, and then play music while you try all the other numbers, or do you want to come back after each number? You really get to custom tailor that to what the users, what they're looking for in terms of that kind of feedback to the caller.
Okay, next question. For those not setting greetings by calendars, how about an expiration date for out-of-office greetings so users don't forget to remove these? This is common for email.
We don't have an out-of-office date yet, but what we do is tell you as soon as you log into your mailbox that, by the way, your out-of-office greetings enabled.
Okay, next question. What about integration with hosted services? We use Slack for IM presence, and what about telephony like 8x8 West or other outside hosted?
So today, the only presence engine we have an integration to is to Skype, or Link and Skype. We're looking at a second one that's using the new standard, and that would open it up to quite a few of them. That is not in the next version of product, so that is something you'd be talking about early next year at the earliest. On the telephony side, assuming we're going to use a SIP integration, we can work with any of those services. That being said, whether or not they will let a customer connect to our system is the big question. So let's say you're going to go completely hosted at one of the telephony services, and it's in a BroadSoft switch somewhere. And basically, you could host CX on our, we host it. We offer a hosted offering as well. So you could host it on our side and connect to the BroadSoft switch and have everything hosted. That's going to be completely functional. But the vendor who's using that BroadSoft switch has to make the decision that they will open that up for external telephony connections. And some do and some don't. So it's a sort of a case-by-case, what are you trying to do, that we would have to look at to answer that question.
Oops, I was on mute. Thanks, Neil. Okay, I'm just doing a quick scroll through here. It looks like that wraps up the questions. Just a reminder, once again, the slides are available in the handouts area. I will send them as well, a link to download those when we send out the follow-up email later today, which will also include a link to this recording as well as some of our upcoming webinars. We'd love to see you again on a future session that we're offering. There's a couple happening next month. And then just to wrap up, just want to thank everyone for taking the time out of your day. We hope that you found this worth your time, and I'll let Neil close us up.
Thank you, Ann, and I echo her sentiments. We know it's we were actually talking before the webinar about how hard it is. It's easy to accept these requests when they come to you, but as your day and week fills up, it's a little harder to attend. So we always appreciate when you take the time to do that. And we appreciate feedback. So you should be letting us know if this isn't what you like, if you want something in more depth or less depth or different topics covered, go ahead and let us know. You can always get information to us at info@avst.com. We monitor that religiously, and we really do take this feedback into consideration. There's a number of these webinars that came directly from that kind of feedback. So thanks, everybody, and have a nice week.
To learn more about AVST, please visit www.avst.com.